Guusto webinar, all about how to kind of hire folks to build teams. I'm joined today by Mike Evers from Nebula.io. Maybe we'll just give folks kind of a couple minutes to get checked in here. So if you've joined us, feel free to kind of put in the chat where you're joining us from, and we're going to try something new today, actually, because this is a closed environment for all guests. If you'd like to kind of share your LinkedIn profile, it helps us kind of connect with you. It also helps other guests kind of connect with you there as well. So toss it in the chat. And while we're waiting for kind of everybody to get checked in there, Mike, why don't you do a quick intro for yourself?
Sure. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Excited to spend some time with you today. And thanks for bringing me on. My name is Mike Evers. I serve as Chief Strategy Officer for Nebula.io. We are a machine learning kind of late stage startup, if you will, just gone to market over the course of the last 6 months. And we are a machine learning platform that helps organizations source, understand, engage, and manage talent at scale. My background previous to Nebula actually started out in executive search and human capital advisory work. Ran a practice down here in Miami, Florida. Worked with many different startups and scale-ups and Fortune 100 companies, and then got into tech and specifically software. Helped a company called Harry conceptualize and materialize a platform that was an end-to-end workforce management solutions platform that serviced the hospitality and service industry verticals throughout the entire employee lifecycle. And then joined Nebula about 2 years ago on the founding team at the whiteboarding stage, and have been working here ever since. And again, we've just gone to market over the course of the last 6 months. So thank you again for the opportunity, and excited to spend some time with you today.
Fantastic. I'm really excited to learn more about Nebula, but also dig in with you. Get some of your insights from kind of working at Harry. I know that their platform serves a lot of customers with frontline workforces, and it's something that here at Guusto we spend a lot of time kind of thinking about, talking about. So should be an interesting kind of place to kind of dig in here. Let's see where folks are kind of calling in from. So we got Toronto, Pittsburgh. Hi, Linda. Hi, Rachel, Ontario. Oh, great. Yeah, Rachel, thanks for sharing your LinkedIn there. We've got Andre coming in from Michigan. Dorothy, Austin, awesome. Tyler, Vancouver. Hi, Tyler. Tyler's on our team. And one more here. We got Brooklyn coming in from Little Rock. So welcome, everybody, to today's webinar, all about kind of hiring to build high-performance teams. And Mike's gonna share his insights on how to kind of, not just think about hiring as a transactional thing to approach, filling vacancies, but rather bringing in people who help build on the team's kind of strengths and weaknesses, and what might complement them. So let's dive in. Mike, right out of the gate, kind of like when you're conceptualizing kind of like hiring for kind of whether it's a small team or a big team, where do most companies kind of like go wrong, and how do we get kind of like stuck in this trap of, kind of just trying to fill the immediate vacancy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I don't know that I would say we've gone wrong. I would say where the opportunity lies now, thanks to a lot of advances in technology and a lot of the systems and platforms that exist, including yours and mine, there's a lot more opportunity to achieve more, especially when evaluating the absorbent amount of data that we have in all these different systems, to be able to realize the power of building a team versus the traditional approach and the way that it's kind of always been, in that we've got a vacancy, we need to fill a role. So one of the first things we do is, what is this role? Let's write a job description. Let's distribute it out across the land. Let's talk to our network about it. And let's see who comes back to fill that vacancy. But we've always thought about it in this way of, what is this role and how do I fill this vacancy? But now, thanks to the underlying power of data science and machine learning and the deep learning that exists and has been injected into many of the different workflows, we can take a much more holistic approach and allow ourselves the opportunity to identify internal strengths and weaknesses that maybe we could utilize for reskilling or perhaps upskilling, as well as identifying those new skills that maybe are missing. But instead of us evaluating just that individual profile or the skill set of the vacancy that we're looking to fill, we can start to now evaluate holistically over all those different data points, individual members that would collectively form this team or this division inside of a business or inside of an organization, where maybe they can help complement some of the skill sets or some of the desires out of this role and uptick somebody that may not have all of those fluencies, but would be a phenomenal fit in many different other ways, and perhaps complement those pre-existing individuals on the team and uptick the performance of the overall team versus that of just the position. And so it just goes back to the old adage of, individuals win games and teams win championships over the long haul. And now
Michael J. Michael Jordan.
Exactly. And so that can be realized today thanks to us actually being able to acquire, aggregate, interpret, analyze, and understand all of the data that exists thanks to all of the tools and software and systems that companies like yours and mine have created over time.
Very interesting. And so when you think about kind of beginning to map out your team's kind of current strengths and weaknesses, like do you have a framework that you kind of use or have used kind of in your past roles that you might be able to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of James Collins, who wrote Good to Great.
Yep.
And I think taking that philosophy of getting the right people on the bus first and then assigning seats later certainly complements or promotes what I am bringing to the table today or being an advocate for or endorsing. And so when we think about that, who do we want on the bus? The first thing that we have to evaluate is our values and what type of environment essentially do we need to offer for the right type of culture to be conceived? Because I think that we get lost in terms of culture and values of these 3, 4, or 5 words that are written on the headquarter wall or whatever else it may be. And in reality, as an executive team or those that hire or their supporting teams from a performance perspective, we don't necessarily have the capability to fully create that. What we can create and what we can offer is the environment in which that's conceived, because the culture is created by those that are actually in the thick of the weeds, in the operations, especially when we're talking about the frontline workforce, where you've got the vast majority of individuals that are contributing or impacting that culture aren't the ones that are sitting in the room that came up with the 3, 4, 5 words that define the culture or the values of the organization. And so what intrinsic values need to exist inside of the people that we bring on the bus for the envisioned culture to be created? And how, as a leadership team, can we create or support the conceiving of that culture by the type of environment that we offer for it to be created inside of? So we got to have our values mapped out. 2, kind of going from the top down, if you will, what's traditionally been called OKRs or organizational key results, I would offer a different definition of that and changing it to OSOs, and that would be organization strategic objectives. And so that's where it helps us define where is the bus headed, what is our mission, if you will, and where do we want to be from a visionary standpoint. And it's important when we think about mission and vision, vision really should be at least 5 years out, if not 10 years plus out. And that mission should follow a smart, goal setting format or framework in some way or another. And we should really reduce that down to 18 to 24 months at most, so that it's can be actionable and attainable and realized, and we can start to focus on some of those goalposts. And for them to not be so far out, they just seem daunting in nature. And so when we think about the framework for those strategic objectives, you are going to essentially empower or employ the SMART framework of the new way of doing that. And that would be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, meaning it's mission supporting, and then time-based as well. So once we have those clearly outlined and we've vocalized them throughout the organization and everybody's behind those or supporting of them or has a chance to add, delete, modify, or enhance, then we start to think about the team and the division that this individual, if you will, or this vacancy that we're looking to fill will support. And so that's where we can start to classify them as team specific KRSs, if you will. So TKRS or team specific key results is what we're looking to deploy in that fashion. And when we deploy that with that same new model, this is when we really start to look at realistically, what can we attribute success to and how can we incentivize and motivate the team against some of those key results and performance standards that we're setting in place. So we've got our vision, mission, values. We've got our team and divisional key results and outcomes that we're looking for. And now we can start to take a look at the individual role. And with that individual role, then we're getting into the traditional KPIs, if you will, which shouldn't be any more than 5. And these should, of course, support the TKRs and the OSOs that I previously mentioned. So the KPIs need to be clearly listed in everyone's job description up front. And if you're not willing to do that already, you don't really know what you need yet in some way, shape, or form. And so we haven't taken the time to actually go through the process to better understand what it is or how we can get the most out of this role and ultimately this team. And so first things first, just like with anything else, with an opportunity, we've got to define what that opportunity is. And this kind of framework or setting the stage or clearly articulating what it is that we're after and how this supports both the team, the greater the business, and us striving towards a mission and a vision certainly clarifies that not only for an individual that could be entertaining an opportunity with your organization, but everyone else on the team. So it drives accountability and transparency.
Yeah, it goes kind of so much further beyond just kind of making the hire, right? And like, how do we kind of make that person successful, but across the organization, how are we making kind of our broader teams and ultimately kind of the company successful?
Absolutely. And so anybody that's also evaluating incentives or bonus performance metrics or KPIs attached to that, they should again be supporting of the TKRs and the OSOs, if you will. And so we should tie those back to how does this support the mission and will that ultimately support the vision? How do we support the team objectives? And then the individual components as well. And for me in the past, we also include in everybody's KPIs a cultural and value component of that as well. So at Nebula, our culture and our values are scientific, humanistic, and driven. And so in a 360 evaluation model, not only are we evaluating did somebody achieve their set out metrics or performance standards, but internally from a 360 perspective, from an overall organizational aspect, they've interacted or should have interacted with so many different people from the team. How is that person's interpretation or understanding of how they're contributing or enhancing or perhaps not contributing in a positive way to the values of the organization? And so everybody inside of our team isn't just evaluated by their boss or their superior or their team or the people they interact with on a day-to-day basis, but also cross-functionally. And what this does is also supports the fact that even if Mike shouldn't necessarily be interacting on a day-to-day business standpoint with somebody from a completely different division, there should still be some overlap and interaction there so that we can create a unified approach and model inside of our business.
And so how do you go about doing that, Mike? Because it's definitely an area that like recognition plays a role, right? Like we think about kind of like tying recognition programs to core values, so that if somebody is demonstrating one of those core values, scientific or humanistic, driven, I think you said the third one was. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to, during that performance review, kind of look at individuals and say, hey, let's see kind of what, did Mike get any sort of shout outs from his colleagues over the past 6 months, 12 months for, demonstrating some of these core values? Beyond recognition programs, is there ways that you've seen this done at other organizations or that you're doing kind of internally at Nebula?
So I think from a value perspective, what you guys are doing is amazing, and you're offering this platform that really automates and makes it easy for everyone to participate. And that is half the battle, if not the majority of the battle, most of the time, of just making it accessible for people to actually praise.
Well, especially on the front lines, right? Like when you talk about kind of like frontline workforces that are out in the field on the floor, like you have to remove every possible boundary and make it as simple as possible for people to participate. Otherwise, they're doing their jobs. They're kind of manufacturing products, or they're kind of on the retail floor. So definitely with you on that one.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, again, the accessibility, but the common phrase of praise in public, coach in private. And so rewards programs like what you guys are offering certainly enables that and empowers it, so that overall, from an organizational standpoint, not only is Kyle wrote something in the chat here. So with Kyle, is he getting praise from the team or the performance, and everybody's feeling that on a day-to-day basis that he's interacting with? But let's make sure that Kyle is recognized by the overall organization and people are seeing that, and so that they want to experience that or perhaps interact with Kyle. And that brings additional amplification of the impacts that Kyle is making holistically, and incentivizes others to contribute to that fundamental kind of component of driving a holistic and organizational centric, value-driven culture.
Nice. Okay. And I see Kyle's actually posted a question here we had from an audience member. So Bob, thanks for writing in. He asks, Mike, here we got it up on the screen. When you think of a quality hire, which not every org is measuring, let alone doing consistently, do you think QOH should be partly tied to team metrics?
100%. And there's.
Can you just clarify QOH for us?
I think it's saying quality of hire.
Quality of hire, yeah.
So quality of hire, absolutely, it should be tied to the team to farther, endorse what I'm kind of bringing to the table today, and the opportunity that exists in hiring for teams and building teams out versus that of individuals. And so the way that we found the most success and in multiple organizations of my past is that we are tying individual performance as well as the quality of hire metric, or the ROI, or that return, to 4 different kind of buckets, if you will. And that follows kind of that same breakdown. And so what are the OKRs, or what I rephrased as OSOs, and are we achieving those at the company/organizational level? Whether that's a revenue components, and we've got a BHAG, if you will, and a target that we're looking to achieve, whether that's net promoter scores that we're trying to get out of the software that we've built, or the customers that we service, or inside of healthcare, it could just be overall quality survey, patient satisfaction survey. And so if we're all hitting that and we're achieving those milestones and those objectives, if we will, we should all be positively impacted by the success of the overall organization's strategic objectives. And then when we get into the team and the division, since you and I are both kind of in software, if we think about a product manager, and maybe we want somebody to, on average, from a team component, and we're responsible for the development of a product or the user experience that we're offering, we want to see 100% completion rates on new users onboarding workflow. And so that we've properly trained them, and we've made that engaging enough while offering enough value throughout it, so that we've set our new users up for success, if you will. That is team derived, meaning you could have a product manager over here that's working on this component of the platform, and another one over here that's working on this component of the platform. But all together, we're responsible for creating a unified vision and approach that ensures success in the designs and the development work that we do offer. And so if we're hitting that objective, which arguably we're in control of because we're designing and we're developing from a product standpoint, the team should be able to get rewarded for those team/divisional KRs that we're speaking to. Then we get into the individual components, and how do we measure your specific success as an individual contributor, regardless of whether you manage a team or not. What are your specific KPIs? And then additionally, that fourth component is that value metric, just so that we're constantly evangelizing the values of the organization, which should be and should have been well thought out to support our overall vision and mission as a business. So those four key components, and absolutely team metrics are tied to that, and they should be incentivized from a performance management standpoint.
Awesome, Bob. Hope that answered your question. And for others kind of on the call, feel free to kind of drop any questions in as we go here, and we'll be happy to kind of tackle those with Mike. So Mike, kind of back to kind of this first question about kind of like building teams. How have you seen, because often, even internally here, kind of at Guusto, we'll have kind of just this like immediate need to fill like a skill gap. And so like, how do you balance that with the kind of potential for growth of a new hire? And so like, you need, let's go hire. How do you get the teams to kind of like slow down and go, hey, wait a second, have we done X, Y, Z? To really make sure that this person is complementing the team, and we are kind of finding the right candidate for the role.
Yeah. So unfortunately, maybe what I would say there is if we've done the work ahead of time that we need to set ourselves up for this approach that yields phenomenal results, drives everything forward, that should almost organically be able to occur. And so that we're not just stuck on the vacancy, but we have a constant evaluation and understanding of, hey, maybe we do just have this skill gap, but so do we just go hire for the skill gap and classify that person as a W-2? Or do we have the capability to understand holistically, even if this person has this specific skill, maybe we also know that Bob, who asked the last question, Bob is great at his job in all of these different components and perhaps excels in even ones outside of it. But maybe on his job description or his responsibilities, he's B+ level in this specific component of it. And so if we can bring in somebody from the outside that not only has the skill that we're searching for today, but they can maybe perhaps be somebody that Bob leans on to gain more exposure and experience and understanding and fluency in that to bring him up to a level A, why wouldn't we be evaluating that when we're doing something as serious as offering employment, which is arguably one of the most influential components of anybody's life, given the amount of time that we spend there. And so if we're really just looking to hire for a specific skill set, this is the boom of the now of the fractional workforce, if you will, or project-based remote opportunities. And in that case, you should just be hiring in that use case. And maybe you just have a project-based specific role that's working on contract or in a fractionalized or in a marginalized way, because you're not really in a position yet to fully understand how to best impact not only that vacancy, but also the overall good of the team and organization holistically.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. And so can you share kind of an example of like an experience or a case study where like you kind of did this proper kind of like format and identified kind of the skill gaps on the team and where the opportunities might be to kind of complement existing team members, and how that led to a successful hire? Like, can you walk us through like a little bit of an example?
Yeah, I can absolutely. I can kind of walk you through an evolution of my buy-in into this approach and the power that it has. And so that comes all the way back from the human capital advisory firm that I worked with that also services an executive search firm. And so we had plenty of clients that were coming to us and saying, hey, we don't really know necessarily what we need. We need a little bit of this and we need a little bit of that. And more oftentimes than not, they're coming to us and saying, how can you help us define what this is? And that's where we kind of took the step back and we said, well, let's evaluate the team. And so when we did that previous, a decade or so ago, all we had were these like skills-based assessments, if you will. And you can come in and you play a game on a phone or whatever it may be as a part of the application process. And then we kind of stopped tracking the data. And so we weren't able to comprehend or understand because it was just too much work and administrative work
to be able to track and aggregate that data. So what we did as a part of a service was we would go in and do real-time evaluation, understanding the KPIs or the performance of individual positions, understanding what the responsibilities were, where people were wearing multiple hats inside of an organization, identifying holistically the people that are working with them day to day, as well as their manager and kind of a peer to the manager, and then anybody that would work underneath them. And so when we evaluate that, we start to create a lot of really robust data that starts to connect the people data dots, if you will, and helps us identify who it is that we should be looking for. And so what we would actually do is not only take the pre-hire assessments, the pre-hire application, the pre-hire resume that was included, or any of that documentation, but also look at performance along the way of those individuals that they would be interacting with or have the opportunity to uptick or upskill indirectly, and then bring back essentially a well-defined archetype for not only what is the vacancy and the skill set that we're looking to fill, but this would be the right purple squirrel unicorn profile that would essentially fit into the team, and not only fit, but enhance and increase the performance of not only that specific position, but the team individual, and also support, of course, positive cultural change.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and so what are some of the common challenges that companies face when moving from a more transactional, traditional hiring practice to a more kind of comprehensive approach that you're kind of advising here?
Starting and committing. It's change. Change management is difficult. It's transformational. I can tell you that, like, from the human capital advisory firm that I previously worked at, we were doing all of that manually, and we were needed to charge, because that's just what it costs at the time, a pretty penny to do that work. And now, thanks to all of the deep tech that's available to many different organizations, and still somewhat new, but certainly becoming buyer expected rather quickly, the hype of AI or deep learning or machine learning and generative AI and agentive AI and all the other forms that we're being bombarded with right now. At the end of the day,
all the AIs.
all the AIs, absolutely. At the end of the day, what that's now actually empowering us to do, and certainly not replacing us, but enabling us to perform at a higher level and analyze enormous sets of data across multiple different sources of that information and of that data, to not only pick and choose our way through the data points, but to understand the meaning and the context, and again, the connecting of all of that data, and to be able to understand, realize, and interpret that in relatively, I'm certainly not going to call it simple, but I'm going to call it much more accessible ways than were previously there. And so it's accepting the fact that AI is not coming here to replace you. What AI is coming here to do is to give you an extra set of hands, if not 15 extra sets of hands, to perform better in your position, or perhaps see and realize things in different ways that would previously took months, if not a devoted team, to be able to aggregate, interpret, and analyze, and bring that data back to you in a clear, concise way that oftentimes, by the time that process was done, it was already outdated.
Yeah.
And so now we actually have accessibility to that. So the opportunity is real.
And so, we often see this with recognition programs, or, more broadly with all sorts of HR programs, that, change management is one of the big kind of hurdles, especially when you're impacting, kind of across the entire employee base. And so what we found to work really well is kind of a crawl, walk, run approach. And so, starting programs with smaller cohorts or smaller teams, testing hypothesis, making sure that you've got some champions internally for what you're trying to do, to roll it out to the larger organization. Is that something that you've kind of seen in this space? Like, is this something that you can kind of start testing with, kind of one team, rather than saying all right, entire company, we're changing our hiring practice, HR is going to roll out this whole new thing across the company. Can we test this with a smaller employee subset?
Yeah, I think anything with change management, you're always going to have to get the internal advocates on board. And that is going to take a separate campaign, if you will, or an initial launch campaign, or a case study, or a pilot use case, or proof of value, whatever terminology we use there. And so absolutely, when we talk about building a team, I mean, pick a vacancy. It doesn't matter if it's a duplicated position, if you will, where there's multiple of this type of role or function contributing to a larger volume of demand for that business use case, or a highly specific and specialized role that maybe there's only one or 1.5 to 2 people inside the business that even have the know-how to be able to support that business demand. And so where we can start is just simply on the next vacancy, follow kind of that framework, if you will. What are our values? What is the mission and the vision for the business? How do those values support that? What are the organizational key results or strategic objectives that we're looking to define? Do we have clearly mapped out team and divisional goals and responsibilities? And if we don't, let's write those down and all agree to them and evangelize them holistically. And then let's evaluate this position. And the best thing that you can do inside of that hiring process is be inclusive, and not inclusive to the external market, but inclusive to the team in that hiring decision and in that hiring process. I'm an absolute evangelist and advocate for doing panel interviews, if you will, where there's peers involved in that process. The ratio of success when peers are involved in a panel interview process or in the hiring process and contributing to either feedback or the hiring decision or outcome is tremendous when they're involved inside of it. And that's because they're the people that are going to interact with these individuals every day. And if they're going to attach their name to the hire, they're also going to look out for the best interest of that hire and make sure that they're successful, because now their name is attached to it, even if they're not the direct manager. And so when we're taking that approach and following that framework, as well as a hiring process that's inclusive internally, we start to really transform the way that, again, the transactional hiring of that's still done today has existed. And we're going to get more of the same results, regardless of the industry. I mean, hospitality, high volume, talk about Harry, the average turnover rate inside of hospitality is 120 to 130%, depending on the industry segment. So the person that comes in the door today is likely not going to be there, certainly within the 12 months, and more than 50% of the churn that occurs inside of hospitality occurs in the first 90 days or cycle turnover. And so if I came in and I could do a realistic job preview and rub shoulders with the person that I'm going to be rubbing shoulders with day in and day out, and understand whether or not I want to do that, and let alone they want to rub shoulders with me and feel that I contribute to the overall good of the team, that's obviously going to impact success, probably for the better.
Yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense, right? And we've seen the results of that. We moved when we hired our first HR leader here internally at Guusto, as we kind of went through a hypergrowth phase, and that was one of the first things that he implemented was kind of panels for kind of bringing on new team members, and yeah, I can attest to the buy-in that you get kind of from the team, and how that translates into success for that team. I've got a follow-up question here from Bob. So Bob, love how active you're participating here with us, but are you augmenting that performance and skills data with ONA and so ONA/SNA? Not sure what ONA and SNA is. Mike, you might have a sense.
I believe you're referring to networks. I think when you say ONA and SNA, so organizational network and social network.
Yeah, I did a quick Google search. That seems to be, yep.
But I think so. If that's what you're referring to, organically, the organizational network analysis, yeah. Organically, with the framework that I've kind of outlined and your ability to bring that data in, you should be able to identify the network that exists inside of the organization. And so this is where we're talking about identifying the opportunity for perhaps upskilling or reskilling. And so if you've got the data that helps you understand whether or not you can upskill or reskill, you've got kind of the ONA capability that organically would surface because of that. And then we talk about SNA, or the social network analysis, again, if that's what you're referring to, that would be the opportunity for new skills. And so do you have the capability to take a look at data or a database that gives you access to not only your internal talent ecosystem, that could be current employees, it could be previous employees, it could be previous applicants that for whatever reason were silver medalists or timing didn't make sense or whatever else it is, as well as then understanding what is actually out there in the market, regardless if that market individual or talent profile is raising their hand and saying, I'm open to a new opportunity and I want to be solicited for that. But if you can evaluate ONA and SNA side by side, and you have access to the data or a platform that offers that to you, you are ahead of the rest of the market in current state. And so I certainly don't want to do a sales pitch here, but that has been a focus for Nebula over the course of the last 18 to 24 months, is putting businesses in a position to not only evaluate their internal talent ecosystem, but also the external and the market to better understand if there is an opportunity for upskilling, reskilling, or perhaps we should be looking for new skills and going to an external talent ecosystem to bring that in.
I saw a couple more comments here from Bob. Sorry, my IBM upbringing, acronym heavy. Mike, you're a humble guy, and appreciate you not wanting to kind of do a big sales pitch for Nebula, but it is interesting, right? Like I'd like to know kind of like what led you to kind of join Nebula, like what was the origin story there, and what's the problem that your kind of team is focused on kind of solving?
Yeah, it will. I think I will follow up into Bob's question that just kind of came in there as well. Social graphs, knowledge graphs, how information flows around an org, sort of looks like Mike's picture on the wall. Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. And if I showed you some of our science led graphs or explainers to the way that our models work, they would actually look pretty similar to that. And so how the information flows, again, when you had an email system that first came out, or a paper filing cabinet that still exists in some organizations today, or for the rewards programs that you guys offer, somebody close to me, if you will, their organization, which employs over 10,000 individuals, the only recognition program and rewards program that they have is still on a bulletin board that's probably seen by, I don't know, 50 to 200 people a month on average, or less than 1% of their workforce.
Right.
And it's not evangelized or vocalized out there. And so now, because of these systems that are helping us automate, augment, and consolidate, that data does become accessible. And so thanks to also the evolutions and the advances in set of technology, specifically surrounding large language models or deep learning, we can now interpret all of that in a very unstructured way. Whereas previously, this administrative burden of acquiring that data from all of these different places and then formatting it, or building out giant taxonomies of skills, fluencies, or whatever else it may be, to support actionable insights around that, really don't need to be that structured anymore, thanks to the advances of the large language models and agentive and generative AI. And so I think with Nebula and why Nebula for me, my background inside of talent acquisition, human capital advisory, hiring well over 1,000 individuals inside of operations myself directly, then getting into software, building out an end-to-end workforce management platform. The opportunity remains in all of the different technologies and solutions that are offered today, and that matching really is not good. And so what all of these tools and systems of the past have been built on is specifically talking about the knowledge graphs in some way, shape, or form, is these giant taxonomies of information. So if you think about these systems, even 12 months ago, many of them still didn't understand what prompt engineering was. And that's because they just hadn't taken the time yet to update the taxonomy of the system to realize that prompt engineering was a net new skill. And now we can start to evaluate that. Where we can't and we couldn't previously be able to come into a platform and somebody that has little to no experience in using an outbound talent matching tool like a LinkedIn recruiter or something along those lines that had to write these giant kind of advanced search queries, primarily a Boolean string that would say, if they have this keyword and if it's spelled in this way and in this way or in this way, and perhaps they also have this, or maybe they have this, which is just a bunch of and or statements, we had to directly match the terminology of the search query to that of something that would be directly identified on someone's profile. And so it was very difficult to actually match unless you were using keyword to keyword. And so with Nebula, the real opportunity for us and what we bring to the market and the value that is there is that we are understanding the true meaning and context behind each and every single word, each and every phrase, half sentence, full paragraph, full body of text. And we have built our proprietary models to specifically hone in, again, on that meaning and that context for the human resources, recruitment, talent-specific use case, so that we can bring in high signal information, interpret and understand that in the form of natural language, evaluate a bunch of other data that could be pre-existing, that internal talent ecosystem, those skill sets, those social graphs, those knowledge graphs, to then identify, even though Bob doesn't have this word on his profile, there's a very high degree of certainty and confidence by our models that even though Bob doesn't have it on his profile, it's incredibly likely that Bob understands what that is and can contribute to that cause. But just because Bob didn't include it on his profile, the ways of the past, he's been penalized and perhaps disqualified and never surfaced. So one of the taglines we like to say is we help you find the unfindable. And we do that for people with 20 years of recruitment agency experience, internal talent acquisition experience, human resources experience, or for that hiring manager that has little to no experience. And we've built a platform that's adoptable, intuitive, and approachable enough for them to come in, use natural language, just state what it is that they're looking for, us to understand what that is, as well as evaluate some of the internal data and the external data from the marketplace to put them in a position to make a well-informed decision and identify and shortlist top-tier talent that fits and will enhance the organization and the team in rather short order, probably much faster than it took me to explain that.
And Bob, with all of his acronyms on his LinkedIn profile, won't get skipped over. I have to imagine, Mike, that there's a huge benefit in terms of reducing bias in hiring. That whether it's Nebula or kind of any of these AI hiring platforms that can help us kind of remove some of that human bias. Is that something that you're seeing or kind of working on with your team?
Yeah, man, you really set me up to plug Nebula here, and I'm trying to.
We'll try to do it kind of holistically across, because there's a few players in the space, right? That
there's actually, so Workday has a big lawsuit against them right now for bias in the platform against protected classes, and so I think whether or not we want to realize it as humans, we are all biased, whether that's consciously or subconsciously. And so in any hire that does occur, there's going to be some subjective bias that's included in that decision-making process that has always been done by humans in the past. And the human should always be, of course, in the loop on any hire or any recommendation. But when we think about that, previously it just wasn't documented because nobody would either document their bias or weren't aware and the subconscious bias was occurring. And so the models that have been built, we have to realize they've been built by humans and the humans have trained them. And so that could be done by historical data and it could be done by organically created or generated data. But in reality, it is an interpretation and understanding of the decision-making process of historical data and the way that things have been done. So when people are kind of worried about bias inside of AI and the tools that exist today and some of the solutions that are out there, and many of which, like Google and Apple, ran multi-year, several $billion later campaigns to try to identify talent that were then proven to be biased, and they had to completely scrap those projects. And so I think it's just important to kind of take that step back and realize, well, all this is really doing now is creating a record of the bias that has occurred over the last several decades that previously wasn't available or accessible to us from a data component perspective. The opportunity that exists inside the landscape that Nebula has capitalized on early, and it was actually awarded a patent after a 3.5-year patent application process, are patent states that we're an apparatus for determining role fitness while eliminating unwanted bias. So if you just go off of previous and historical data to train these models that would say that this person could be good or couldn't be good, so on and so forth, you're going to continue to get that bias in there. And it's oftentimes interpreting information in some way, shape, or form of a protected class, because that is just the fact of the matter. If you go into any system or tool today and it allows you to search for, let's say, minority candidates, essentially the platform has the capability to filter on minority candidates or people of specific sex or origin, if you will. And so if the platform has that capability and that model that sits behind it, or the several models that sit behind it, have access to that filtering mechanism or the historical records, it's also going to be biased, undoubtedly. And so what we actually do at Nebula, and the way to properly circumvent or remove that, and don't take it from me, take it from the government that's awarded us a patent for our approach, is if you scrub and you clean the data ahead of time using a different model that removes any of those bias generating components, such as sex, age, race, religion, origin, and then you're only evaluating the data after all of that information is removed by a separate entity and model to then match against a search query using natural language that goes through that same scrubbing or cleansing process, you're now, with proof or with a patent, able to state that any unwanted bias has been removed from the process. And so,
fantastic.
Not everybody is doing that. I can certainly tell you that is not the case. And because we get stuck in this vibe, especially with AI, of like, I want to create a mini version of myself, and maybe that's not always the best thing. Maybe there is a way for that model or the agents that we start to deploy to first interpret and assess and remove any of those maybe subconscious things that weren't best practices that did occur over a historical period of time, and then best support and perhaps evolve even the practices or approaches that we've taken in the past. And now some of those models are starting to upskill us as hiring managers or team builders.
Yeah, I mean, what a time that we're living in, and like what a potential kind of opportunity, right? Like this just wouldn't be possible manually to scrub all of that data and kind of run it through kind of a manual process. So I want to leave some time here for questions. We're almost kind of to the hour. We've got about 10 minutes left. Did any folks kind of, I've got a few more questions here, but let's see if we've got any more questions from audience members. Maybe while we're waiting for any of those to come in, one last question on kind of my end. We touched a little bit on kind of, metrics that you would use to kind of measure the success of your team-based hiring strategy. So kind of taking a step back from that, thinking about kind of like employee development plans, how do you kind of integrate those into hiring strategy to ensure that, that the team is kind of continuously growing, and you're also kind of surfacing those to potential candidates to, help attract kind of the best possible talent?
Yeah. So I'll caveat this by saying that we sometimes get there is a peak and there is a maturity level where optimal performance is reached, and we could start to go over that by introducing requirements or demands that just aren't attainable or aren't actionable and can't be realized. And we get stuck sometimes, certainly at the executive level, of how are we going to increase this by 5% next year? Or how are we going to reduce this by 10% next year? And then that kind of just sticks and it sticks. But eventually you do get to a point of optimal performance, and optimal performance doesn't necessarily mean that it is the world's best metric at this. It means holistically, are we performing at a level that exceeds expectations and contributes to the personal, professional, and financial drivers and motivators of the individuals and teams that make up our organization, our number one asset? And are we holistically achieving and exceeding expectations when it comes to the business and the culture that we're attempting to create, the budgetary constraints that we have or that we're looking to optimize, and the overall vision, mission, and value contribution factors? So you've got culture, you've got performance, and you've got budget on the organizational side. And then on the individual side and on the team side, you've got personal, professional, financial. What are our drivers and motivators? And so when we're evaluating from a team component and some of the metrics that we're trying to establish, what we really want to do there is make sure, one, that we have buy-in. And so those team goals and metrics should be analyzed by historical data, revisited often, if not quarterly, or more frequently, adjusted. And we've got to be open from a leadership component to adjusting and modifying those based on the feedback and the sentiment that we have. And then as we evaluate and we determine those, we've got to, again, evangelize and vocalize those internally. So not only my team knows my objectives, but the whole of the organization knows this team's specific objectives and strategic incentives, if you will. And once we get to that spot, what we can then do is start to celebrate and start to reward, or start to modify and continue to contribute towards the overall good of the organization, which is those three components on either side, as previously mentioned. So I think when you start to take the team approach, what you're also empowering is that level and layer of inclusivity, not only in the hiring decision, but in the performance and the good of the team, the success of the person, the contributions, the evolutions, and perhaps sometimes the revolutions that need to occur from a cultural standpoint of the business. And you also position a high level of accountability for each individual, regardless of whether they're at an associate level or all the way up at the C-suite, to drive adoption and also, again, inclusivity surrounding the overall objectives and initiatives that we have going on. And so that offers a way to level up or perhaps level out and make sure that everybody's held accountable to contributing towards the overall goals and missions and values of the business.
That's a great, I feel like it's a great note to wrap on. It was a kind of a nice summary of, kind of where we should be kind of striving to go. Mike, if folks want to learn more from you, this has been awesome. I've got a whole just whackload of notes. So we'll look to be kind of implementing some of these internally, but also, sharing some of your insights with our clients. If folks want to learn more from you, where's the best place to kind of connect with you?
LinkedIn is always going to be great. I think somebody just threw up something in there, but I'm on LinkedIn under Mike Evers. You can do Mike Evers Nebula, something along those lines. I think we're going to set up any of the audience too with some access to the platform at no charge, so you can kind of see the way that we've set up some workflows and experience the platform, and then perhaps at a later date announce some sort of partnership with you guys as well.
Yeah, excited. And so we'll have our team kind of follow up with everybody that registered for the webinar with that offer from Nebula, as well as I know our team has something similar, just a way to kind of try out Guusto system there for free with some funds in the account. So if you're interested in kind of learning more about Nebula, nebula.io, or Guusto, Guusto.com. And thanks again, Mike, for taking an hour out of your day to kind of spend with our audience. And yeah, it's been time well spent. So really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, man. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks to everybody for your participation and engaging dialogue. Much appreciated. We'll see you guys soon.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much. Thanks, Bob.